On April the 23rd, 1968, 14-year-old Roy Tutill was hitching a ride home from school. Thumbing a lift was something Roy did every day. He was saving his bus fare to buy a bicycle. Roy didn't wait long for a ride on the busy A24 in Surrey. But within minutes, the driver suddenly turned off the main road. Scared, Roy was driven down an isolated lane. Trapped inside the car, he was stripped and subjected to a terrifying ordeal. No one heard his screams for help. Roy was then strangled with his own school tie. The killer put the body into the boot of his car and continued on his way home. Roy Tutill's murder was front-page news in 1968, and despite a massive manhunt, the killer was never caught. 33 years later, in January 2001, the case took an amazing turn. Key forensic evidence now led detectives to the doorstep of the man they believed to be Roy Tutill's murderer.
They've been deployed to the subject's address, just received information that he's in the house. So the team's towards going on standby.
Right, Brian, you've been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Roy Tutill. Do you understand the offences you've been arrested for?
I understand what you say, but I refute everyone. No, I've been up here since.
Okay, listen to me. What's going to happen now?
64-year-old Brian Field was a self-employed gardener from Solihull. Divorced with 3 children, he seemed an unlikely murderer.
Okay, now have you got everything you need? You've got some money, you've got your glasses, do you want something to read, a book? Are you reading a novel or anything at the moment, or what?
No, I am actually, yeah, I'm getting it upstairs.
So we'll go upstairs with Paul and you can get that. There's no rush, take your time.
Field was taken to Staines police station to be interviewed. Over the next 3 days, he would take Detective Sergeant Graham Hill on an extraordinary journey. A journey never seen before on British television.
Obviously, you've been arrested for the murder of a boy called Roy Lindsay Tutill. Yeah? Now, that boy was a Kingston Grammar School boy, and he went missing on his way home from school in April of 1968. Having got off of the bus on his way home from school and was never seen again until his body was recovered, found by some forestry workers on the Friday, which is the 26th. Yeah. So that's the day the boy went missing, and the boy's name was Roy Lindsay Tutill. T-U-T-I-L-L. Have you ever heard that name?
No.
Okay. Did you ever give any schoolboys a lift in your car at all?
No.
In 1968?
No.
Are you quite sure of that?
Yeah, positive.
Did you ever stop and talk to any schoolboys and engage them in any kind of conversation?
No.
Roy Tutill, affectionately known to his school friends as Tuts, had been raped before being murdered. His body was later dumped on Lord Beaverbrook's estate near Dorking. The murder of a child is every parent's worst fear. Public confidence had been shaken, and Detective Chief Inspector Philip Doyle was the man given the task to restore it.
I have already issued a warning about children or young people thumbing this. We consider this as a serious threat to young people, and I would advise all parents to stop their children from...
Detective Doyle's hunt for the killer began at the Beaverbrook estate, where Roy's body had been found.
Memories? Well, this bears no resemblance to what it was in 1968. And the body was about between 6 and 10 yards in there, with a pink and grey blazer on the top of it. But even here we could see that he had been strangled. And you know, he was only a smallish child, really. I was a parent myself of a boy about the same age. A child murder is horrific, any child murder. But this particular murder was, in my view, particularly barbarous. I could never have any sympathy for the man who did this murder, ever.
Roy had been looking forward to going on Easter holidays with his family.
Roy, he was ever such a lovable chap. The parents, they went numb for several weeks. You could hardly speak to them. I tell you, what these people have been through, Dennis and Hilary, you cannot imagine. There was such a loving family, and so close to each other. And then to be ripped apart like this, it's just unbelievable that anybody can do that.
Roy vanished from a bus lay-by at the Bridge Road roundabout in Chessington, Surrey. The area was flooded with bobbies. Appeals for information were made, and hundreds of motorists were questioned. Someone must have seen Roy get into a car.
A bus driver told us that a silver-grey Austin Princess car was parked in the bus lay-by, and he told us the boy described as Tutill was dressed, talking to the driver of this car, which of course was a good lead at that.
But no one had seen Roy Tutill get into a white Mini. The police were looking for the wrong car. The killer had simply driven away.
We spent a lot of time. I think 1 million car records were searched at County Hall in Kingston in those days. And that was manual searching. And we never did find it.
Desperate for new leads, Detective Chief Inspector Doyle staged the first ever televised police reconstruction. His own son played Roy. Calls came in, but as the months and then the years went by, hope faded of ever catching the killer.
My colleague's going to show you a blazer, which is a copy, it's an identical copy to the blazer that Roy was wearing when he disappeared. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to hold it out of the bag. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a blazer which is quite vivid in colour.
It is, yeah.
Have you ever seen that blazer before?
No.
Or one similar?
No.
No? Okay. Now that was the Kingston Grammar School blazer in 1968.
No. I didn't know, I didn't know anything about the schools or anything around here, because we'd only moved up. Only moved up in 68, didn't we? No, 67 was it? 68. I wasn't in this area for...
Okay. So you've never seen Roy Tutill?
No.
And you've got no knowledge of anyone who would have worn a blazer like that?
No.
Are you 100% sure?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Others sure that Brian Field was innocent were his friends in the local Solihull community. They could not believe he'd been arrested for the murder of a child.
We're just all in total shock, and straight away I thought, oh, she's got the wrong man, it's a mistake. they've arrested him by mistake.
I was of the same opinion as everybody else at the beginning. Not Brian, they've got the wrong guy.
That's right, I think I was exactly the same. That can't be right.
I mean, I thought it was a joke.
But the police believed they did have the right man. In the weeks before his arrest, teams of detectives had researched the whole of Brian Field's past. What they found was a man who had been leading a double life.
I think what you've got to remember with Brian Field is that he has presented this persona for so many years and perfected it to such an art that everyone you would have spoken to would have said, you've got the wrong man. He is not the man that you think he is. And all that is that he's become skilled over a number of years in manipulating people to think he's something that he ultimately isn't.
So who was the real Brian Field? The journey was about to begin. Brian Field was a young man when Roy Tutill was murdered in 1968. To go back to that time, D.S. Graham Hill knew he had to begin with Field's past.
What we'd like to do, Brian, is take you back a little bit then. Just you give us a little bit of background about yourself, okay? Tell us a little bit about your life in general.
First of all, I tell you, notice my unusual name, right? That's my mother's surname, right? Lunn was my proper name, Brian Lunn. I was adopted by parents in Lincolnshire, Field, and that's why I got changed it by default.
Did you have adopted brothers and sisters?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How many of those did you
There was 15 of us altogether.
15, it's a big... So it sounds to me like you were quite lucky by the family that adopted you.
Yes,
Were a loving family, were they?
Yeah.
Yeah? What was your time like there?
Very good.
Good.
Very good, yeah.
To create a family bond where previously none existed, that is the answer to the problem of the homeless child. That their father and his wife Ruby are right cannot be doubted as we look at their faces.
To the outside world, Brian Field's life at Linwood Manor was a picture of happiness and family values. One of his younger foster brothers remembers it differently.
Brian was the good guy. He was Mr. Perfect. He worked hard. He was always clean. He was smart. He could do no wrong. If anybody ever said anything bad about Brian, it just wasn't believed. So when things began to happen to me, they wouldn't have believed me. Brian? Don't be ridiculous. You're imagining it. You're making it up.
Behind the choir boy image, Brian learnt how to hide his double life.
He was very devious and crafty. The way he gave out this outward image of the perfect boy, the perfect young man, to what he really was. Evil, paedophile. It always took place in the same place, and almost always at the same time. It was Saturdays, after lunch, upstairs, and Brian would be there under the bed waiting for me. I can't remember how Brian, the words he said, but he used to strike terror into me. He used to force me to masturbate him, you know. And then he would sodomize me, you know.
Andrew's abuse continued for years.
This room here, this is the one. Sorry. It's ruined my whole fucking life. Ruined it. Ruined it.
Andrew was not the only younger foster brother to suffer at the hands of Field.
With Brian, he used to put his arms round me, and hugged me, and he used to give me a cuddle. Brian came into my bed, and I was wondering what he was doing. I treated him like my oldest brother, and I had faith in him. And I thought it was all right, and he was comforting me. And then he started to stroke my body and all that. And then he interfered with me. I didn't realise his slyness and all that. I thought he was giving me love.
Unaware of events behind closed doors, the media continued to portray the Fields as the perfect family. In 1957, they were honoured on This Is Your Life. Brian had begun his national service and was wearing his Royal Marine uniform.
When I was 7, I was all mixed up with life and I didn't know what to expect. My father, Paul, took me from an institution and told me he was going to give me a home. From then on, I believed in miracles. The Royal Marine Corps is the finest in the world. Dad groomed us to be gentlemen, and one day I hope to have a family of my own, just like him.
In 1967, Brian Field was happily married and raising a family in suburban Surrey. He had a good job with the Milk Marketing Board, and his natural charm soon led to a public relations role for them. In February 1968, he was to make another television appearance.
Well, with me is Brian Field, who is the head of this testing service for the Milk Marketing Board.
The main object is to locate and diagnose faults. The tester starts at the pump and goes right through to the teacup.
Because I was living in Surrey at that time, you see.
Yeah. Go on and tell us a bit about that then.
I was working for the Milk Marketing Board. It was a good job, you know. You got a gang of lads working for you. You operated from the head office. I was, funny enough, quite happily married then with the boy coming on, Johnson coming on, and things looked good. Just got this new job, and things were looking rosy.
On April the 12th, 1968, Field's second child was born. 11 days later, Roy Tutill was last seen alive in Chessington, Surrey, 6 miles from where Brian Field was working.
Roy Tutill, when he died, was 14 years old. Okay?
Yeah.
Did you murder Roy Tutill?
No, I did not. I don't even know, I've never seen him.
I'm going to show you a photograph of this boy, okay? Okay, and that's a copy of Roy when he went missing.
No, never. I mean, it looks like a lot of lads, really. Yeah. No, I've never seen him before.
You've never seen this boy?
No.
You're 100% sure you've never seen this boy before?
Yeah.
You know, when they're telling me that he'd done this crime 30 years previous, I said, no, they can't have that right. Somebody else's name's going to come up and they've made a mistake.
Brian Field's friends in Solihull had no reason to suspect him. He had been part of their community since 1988.
We'd sit and have a drink and a laugh, and he was very intelligent as well. And he was always doing crosswords, you know, he'd always know the answer before you. He was just a normal person, really.
All my friends got on with him, everybody. I can't say I know anybody that's got a bad word to say about it. He was just a good worker. It was good in everybody's company.
Very likeable fella, you know, no problem. You know, he came round, he did our garden for us. He came round and did some work on our garden when we had our first house. He did some work there.
Mark Harris used to DJ at a nearby pub, where Field was one of the colourful regulars.
going. Who cares? Keep going, Ryan. Go for it.
Field also played chess and ran the quiz night at his local pub. The landlady was another close friend.
He had a charisma. You were just drawn to Brian. He was just interesting to talk to. So then everybody wanted to talk to Brian. You know, he drew you to him. I loved him to bits. I loved him to bits. I did ask him where he came from, and he did tell me, and he said he got divorced and his wife was a teacher, but he didn't want to talk about it, and there was no reason for us to carry the conversation. If the guy doesn't want to talk about it, he doesn't want to talk about it.
I didn't really think that much about it, did I? Just accepted him for what he was, you know, just a friendly chap.
Occasionally, though, I did actually say to Brian, "You've got a dark side to you. You know, where have you been, like, all your life?" And he never. It just, whenever I did say something like that, he would say, "Farming up and down the country, relief milker," and you couldn't get no more out of him.
But Field did have a dark and violent past, one which began at the age of 15 in his home village. It is known locally that on a spring morning in 1951, near Field's foster home, an 11-year-old girl carrying a milk churn met Brian Field riding his bike. Field had a reputation as the village bully. He followed the girl along a track, then ripped the skipping rope out of her hand, pulled it round her neck, and tightened the rope until she started to choke. Field then assaulted her. Never arrested for this offence, Brian Field's lifetime of violent abuse had begun.
Well, Brian Field married my sister in 1967, and when I first met Brian, I looked up to him. I thought he was a really nice guy. He was like a older brother to me, really, and he seemed interested in me. I must have been about 11, 12 years old at the time.
In 1970, Stephen went to see Field and his sister at their home in Shropshire.
I really look forward to going up there in the summer holidays for 6 weeks. You know, great. I'm going to be really happy. I'm going to see some new places. One night, after my sister had gone to bed, we were sitting there watching TV, and he just got up and we turned the TV off. And that was the first time that he abused me. He said to me, "This is a secret between you and I, and don't say anything to your sister," which I never did, because at the time I was frightened of him, and I thought if I say anything, he could kill me. I think maybe if I had not kept my mouth shut, he may well have done, and I could have been a victim. So your natural instincts tell you to keep your mouth shut because you want to stay alive.
Brian Field continued to abuse his younger brother-in-law throughout the early 70s. His next victim was someone he didn't know.
I went up to Scotland to sort out technical I had a problem with a farmer up in near Aberdeen, and I stayed in a hotel, and I'd been with the farmer, sorted the problem out. There was a certain time where if I had a drink, that I'd get that urge, I must have sex. The farmer would call me in, he'd had a few whiskies and everything, and that's when my trouble started. I just lost my head or something.
After leaving the farmer, Field stopped his car on an isolated road in Aberdeenshire. The same road that a 14-year-old boy was using to walk home from a friend's house. Field started to strangle him. But startled, he fled, leaving the boy semi-naked and traumatized, miles from anywhere. The next morning, Field drove home to his family, but 3 days later, his car was traced and the police arrested him. In November 1972, he was given 2 years in prison. Brian Field's double life had finally been exposed. In 1973, Brian Field was released from prison and returned home to Oswestry. Things were strained with his wife, and by 1981, they had divorced. On New Year's Day in 1986, Field was on his way home after his morning shift as a relief milker. 2 15-year-old local boys were also going home. David and Nicholas had been shopping.
A car stopped. I said, "Are you going to St. Martin's?" And the man replied, "Yeah." We got into the back of the car because it only had 2 doors.
So you blokes local?
Yeah. When we got to our village, instead of taking the St. Martin's road, he turned towards Wrexham. I was concerned at this point, but I did not say anything. At the next crossroads, David said, "Can we get out here?" But the man replied, "No, I'll turn around." Suddenly, he picked a tyre wrench from off the floor. He shouted to both of us, "Take your coats and gloves off." I said, "Why?" He said, "Never mind why, just do it." He was very threatening. We turned down a narrow lane. He then said, "Right, take your shoes and trousers off." David said no, but the man said, "Take them off," in a very frightening voice. And I started to cry. As David was unbuttoning the top of his trousers, the man had to slow down because there was another car on the narrow lane. David started shouting and screaming "Help!" to get the other car's attention. But at the same time, I pushed the front seat up, grabbed the door catch and pulled it open. But the man accelerated away along the lane. I was being dragged along the road. David was still inside. And then I just let go.
With the door still open, David then made his escape. Traumatized, both boys were still able to give the police a good description of their attacker. Field was arrested the same day.
would you say that they were young boys? How old do you say they were?
I think they were about 12, 13 or 11, 12. Yeah. They weren't, you know, babies, if you know what I mean. Well, no, I didn't actually tell them because I was driving. But I told them to get undressed. I told them to get undressed. And so, because I was going to take them out of a friend's farm up in the hills. And I was going to, I don't know what I was going to do with them.
At Stafford Crown Court, Brian Field received a 4-year sentence. 2 years later, he was released and began a new life in Solihull at the age of 52.
One of the difficulties I've had trying to explain my life away in Birmingham. See, I've told them that I'm divorced and everything. Yeah, I haven't told any sort of deliberate lies. Everything's been true, but I've not embellished it, but haven't elaborated on it. You know. I didn't want to get involved again. I didn't want to get involved because if I did get too involved, I'd have to tell them about my past. And that's why I'm sort of, you know, work on my own and I keep a distance to a certain extent. I mean, all the young lads around there accept me as a, you know, I've never tried anything on it. I never hinted that I was like that. It just, I go and have my few parties. I mean, I chat women up because that's mainly a facade, really.
He was an all-round one of the lads. We were in our 20s and Brian was, you know, in his 50s. But he seemed to fit in with all that. He seemed to be a genuine all-round guy. He'd sort of, pretty girl would walk by Brian and sort of, you know, he'd follow it with his eye. Like all, you know, like all. He was a normal fella.
Brian was a man's man, one of the boys. Well, when he was 60, we had a collection in the pub, which I must say I've been in the pub trade 21 years and we've never had a collection for anybody else. In all the time I've been in the pub trade. The punter said, "Are we having a collection for Brian for his birthday?" And we did, and we bought him a watch, we bought him a silver tanker, and he had £60 in cash and a cake.
Three years later, in September 1999, Brian Field made the fateful decision to drive home after another night in the pub.
You smell alcohol on your breath, okay? Keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing. That's fine, that's right, we've got one. As you can see, it's gone to red, okay? I'm arresting you for providing a positive specimen. Stand by the window, please.
Arrested, he gave a saliva sample, which was then placed on the National DNA database.
Open your mouth up, mate.
Incredibly, this was to unlock the mystery of Roy Tutill's murder, unsolved for over 30 years. Held on the same DNA database was forensic evidence gleaned from the trousers of Roy Tutill, a speck of semen from his attacker. This DNA profile of Tutill's murderer, a man who'd eluded the police for more than 3 decades, matched the DNA profile of Brian Field. Did the police finally have their man?
And your first name?
Brian.
What's your date of birth?
Shortly after Christmas, January of 2001, we received a phone call from the Forensic Science Service. At the time, that appeared to us to be incredible because if this person was still alive and was traceable, then we could solve something that hadn't been solved for 32 years.
The police now had Brian Field's name. They immediately set up an incident room, but more evidence was needed.
It's all very well to say that man's DNA is there, but you've actually got to put the person within the area of the crime and build a whole circumstantial case around that. The DNA is the jewel in the crown, but you've actually got to paint the background in to assist you with any conviction, tell a story to a court.
Someone who could help paint this picture was Field's own brother-in-law. Only months before, he had given a statement at Grantham Police Station, naming Brian Field as Roy's killer.
It was a very difficult thing to go down there. There was also implications for my family. I was thinking about that. But I just had to do something in the end and get it off my chest and say exactly what this man had done. How evil this bloke was. Roy Tutill was abducted within 5 or 6 miles of where Brian worked at the time in Thames Ditton. Obviously, I knew what he'd done to me. And this really made me think now, you know, did this guy murder Roy Tutill?
Stephen told the police about an incident at Brian's house, which happened the day after Roy Tutill went missing.
He come up to me and was nasty to me and said to me, "You don't go in the garage. I don't want you to go in that garage." So, me, innocently, I said, "Why?"
The pathology report provided the answer. It suggested that Roy's body had been kept in the boot of a small car for several days before being dumped.
Looking back, I suddenly thought to myself, well, was the body of Roy Tutill in the garage at the time? And I'm convinced that it was. And that was the reason why he didn't want me to go in the garage.
Stephen's statement led to a meeting with Surrey detectives. Armed with his testimony and the DNA match, Brian Field was then arrested on February the 21st, 2001.
Did you have your own car at the time?
Yeah.
What car was that?
It was a Mini.
Okay, and what colour was that?
White.
White?
Yeah.
Do you know where Kingston Grammar School is?
No.
Have you ever been to Kingston Grammar School?
No, no.
Did you ever give any schoolboys a lift in your car at all?
No.
In 1968?
No, no.
Are you quite sure about that?
Yeah, positive.
Did you ever stop and talk to any schoolboys? Engage them in any kind of conversation?
No.
2 days into Field's interview, he was still denying Roy's murder.
I think one of the important things that we did during the interviews was to explain forensic issues to him and then to ask him to supply certain samples to us for comparison with the original samples taken back in 1968.
Yeah, Brian. We'd like to ask you to consent to supplying us some samples.
Yeah.
Okay? And they will be in the form of a mouth swab.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some cuttings of your hair.
Yeah.
And possibly some blood.
Right. Yeah.
Are you happy to do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny, when last time I got done with drink driving, they took swabs.
Brian's swabs were taken just before he was put into his cell for the evening. The full impact of what they could yield was beginning to dawn on him. Brian Field's third night in custody was a restless one.
I think Brian knew where he was going. I think he knew that he was coming to a crucial point and he'd reached, he was on that precipice and he was going to step off at some point.
Now, I want to focus your mind in on 1968 again.
Yeah.
Okay? And I want to go back and revisit Roy Tutill. Did you commit an act of buggery with Roy Lindsay Tutill? Tell the truth, Brian.
I'm sorry I've misled you all the time. But I didn't, you know, I've been to prison. I've led you all to lies. I'm sorry.
Brian, look at me. Look me in the eye. It's important now for everybody concerned that we finish this. Yeah, it's gone on a long, long time. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was driving along the road, and I saw this lad get off a bus, and he thumbed for a lift. I'm sure he thumbed for a lift. He stood there. His eye stopped and he got in. And I asked him where he was going.
You're in the car?
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you try to do?
Right, I tried to book him.
Okay. How did you try to do that?
He went over the front seat. Right. And I tried to do it on the front, across the front seat.
So what did was he crying? What was he doing?
No, he wasn't crying. And told him to get dressed again. And I ran and came out the other way.
How did you strangle him?
No, just put the tie around his neck and just tightened it.
Can you demonstrate for me how you did it?
And put it around his neck and just tightened it like that.
So you're demonstrating as if something's gone over and you're twisting your
hand.
Mm. What happened? Tell us.
Just nothing really happened. He just sort of convulsed a bit. Sort of gasping for air, and I just carried on, and suddenly he went like.
Did he try to pull it off at all, or?
I don't think so.
So what happened?
I got out, straightened myself up, put him in the boat, then went home. And I had him in the boat of the car, with the blanket over him. Probably 2 days. Stupid thing. And I went, I said, I've got to get rid of the body. So I said to my wife, I'm going out one night, and I drove around looking for places, a suitable place to dump him. And I threw him out the back of the car. I think I threw him out. And threw his jacket out over him, and then went home.
Okay. You've lived with this secret for 30 odd years, haven't you?
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Terrible.
It was you could have cut the atmosphere with a knife, and we both felt physically exhausted afterwards, because it's not every day you sit down and someone tells you in intimate detail about what they've done and how they've done it and how cold and calculated they've been in while they're doing it. So for me it was both shocking and a sense of relief, all rolled into one. 34 years ago, Roy's body was found here, and the events that took place here was a tragedy that affected many people's lives. Roy's parents died not knowing who was responsible for their son's death.
In November 2001, Brian Field appeared at the Old Bailey. DNA profiling, a science unknown in 1968, had put him on trial.
Anybody who's lost somebody through a murder or a violent death, like Roy had to go through, you want justice for him. You want justice for that person. You want justice for your son. Any mother wants that.
Brian Field pleaded guilty to the murder of Roy Tutill in 1968. He is now serving life imprisonment.
I sympathise with the people that think that life imprisonment is not enough for Brian Field. But at the end of the day, it does not serve our purpose to demonise these people, because what we really want to do is to start to understand why these people commit these offences, so that we can do something about it in the future to protect children.
He's a sad, evil pervert, that's what he is. Preys on innocent, bloody victims, you know. That's the bottom line. He's, you know, Mr. Manipulation, Mr. Evil. Right? He'll twist people, and has twisted people round his fingers.
When he first came to like the Brian, didn't he, I couldn't sleep for a couple of nights. Because I just couldn't believe I knew somebody who could do that. How could I cook somebody a dinner? How could he sit at my table? He sat at my table, and I have fed him. How could I do that? Brian took us all, he sucked us all in, really. Mr. Nice Guys don't exist anymore.
On Boxing Day in 1996, 11-year-old Patrick Warren and 13-year-old David Spencer vanished whilst playing in Chelmsley Wood, Birmingham. Brian Field was working nearby. Now behind bars, the police believe Brian Field still has many more questions to answer.